it's snowing and it's cold. You're gonna have to find a crew, it can't be anyone. They'll have to be there by your side and do what must be done. So go, man, you know that you have it night through day. The pain you will feel it to bring it on with the Archer County Band. Doubts come and some may never die. So I'll ask myself, should I stop before I try? No way, man, mistake, it has been said. I'm all in, so there's nothing I'll regret. But time is ticking and there's so much that's going through my mind. Will I make it? Yes, I will. Our spirits are entwined. So let's get this show on the road. I'm here, I'll stay and I'll carry the load to bring it on with the Archer County Band. But hold on a second now, Good afternoon, folks. You are very welcome to Bandido Talks. Well, we have got an interesting story for all of you today, don't we? Who are we talking about? We are talking about a new Prime Minister in the Netherlands. Our mate Rob Jetten. Now, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I know how to pronounce Rob. Jetten, I'm going to assume I'm correct. We're going to talk about our mate Rob today. He has become the youngest Prime Minister in the history of the Netherlands. And he's got more strings to his bow than that. He's not just the youngest Prime Minister in the history of the Netherlands, but he's also the first openly gay Prime Minister in the Netherlands. Well, by Jesus, it's a historic moment. History is being made in the Netherlands. Go on, the Dutch. We've got this new Prime Minister. We're going to talk all about this, folks, because the way this is being, let's just say, relayed to the public. This gentleman, Rob, I don't know Rob. Full disclaimer, I don't know him. I don't know if he knows of the Bandido. But the Bandido has not met Rob. So I can't pass judgment on his character. And I have to be honest, folks. I haven't even watched a video of the man. I haven't even looked to see how he speaks. I just saw this story this morning. And I thought, fuck, there's the Netherlands in the news. When do we ever hear about the Netherlands? Do we ever hear about the Netherlands? And so this story caught my attention, just because I thought, who the fuck talks about the Netherlands? And so I go into the story, and I sort of get a look at Rob's face, and I think, well, that's an interesting face. He's walking with the king. You could see it in the thumbnail, folks. That was the image for the entire story on the BBC's website. And so I click into this story, and I met the headline. Says he's the youngest ever PM in the history of the Netherlands, and literally the first paragraph of the entire story. So the headline says he's the youngest. It wants us all to know that. The article wants us to know that he's young. Not just young, he's the youngest in the history of this country as a PM. And then in the very first paragraph, the article felt it necessary to inform me, the reader, that not only is he the youngest, but he's the first openly gay Prime Minister. These are very important details, folks, aren't they? Very important details indeed. And I'm reading this article, and I'm sort of looking at how this gentleman Rob, he's been packaged and delivered to the reader. I'm reading it. And so even though I haven't watched a video of this man, of this new Prime Minister, and even though I don't know him personally, so again, this isn't a character assessment. I just thought he had a interesting facial expression, facial complexion. When I saw him on the cover for this story, I thought, that's an interesting face. Because, you know, folks, you can sort of tell by someone's face, not the whole story. Of course, we hear this phrase, never judge a book by its cover. Who invented that phrase? What a load of bollocks. Of course you should judge a book by its cover.
Holy fuck! Now, of course, it doesn't tell you the whole story. When you read the cover of a book, or you observe how a book is being presented to you, of course it doesn't tell you everything there is to know about the inner contents of the book. But folks, of course we should judge a book by its cover. This phrase, "don't judge a book by its cover," is a very sneaky way for trying to convince you to not use your own eyes. Oh no, don't judge a book by its cover. In other words, don't use your own eyes. Of course you should judge a book by its cover. If you see someone and they give you a certain feeling or impression by their facial complexion, how their bone structure is put together in their face, this is important information. Of course it is. We have evolved to be able to assess people physically. And sometimes, when people have certain characteristics in their faces, we all know this, folks. We all know that there are certain people who have what we would call a sneaky complexion, a sneaky structure to their face. They look like a, quote, rat. We know this. We've seen many of these people. And sometimes you can almost guess what someone is like by just how they look. You can look at their jawline, you can look at their eyes, look at the bone structure in general, and you can almost get a good enough read on the person to a degree. We all know this, folks. There are certain people who have what we call friendly faces, faces that are instantaneously going to gain your trust. We know these people, folks. We've all met them. We get a good first impression when we meet someone who has a friendly face. We sort of have a good feeling. We feel like we can trust this person, even though we haven't met them before. But even though there are people who have friendly faces, there are other people who have different faces. We would use different words to describe them. It goes without saying, if we see someone who has a very square jawline, they have very masculine traits, well, that tells you that that's a high testosterone individual. They are probably aggressive. There's a good chance that they have above average aggression in that system because they are giving you masculinity cues. They are giving you testosterone, high testosterone cues with their big square jawline and their big forehead. If they have a big sort of cranium, if they have very robust features to their jaw, to their face. And just as we can have people like that, we can also have sneaky people. People who have faces that look sneaky. They look like they would stab you in the back or throw you onto the bus. They would have no hesitation in sticking the dagger into your side. We also have those faces. They have certain features that make them not particularly trustworthy. Again, folks, if you're in denial about this, you're an idiot. This is basic human biology. We've developed the ability to, of course, judge a book by its cover. It's very important that we do that. And anyone trying to convince you that judging a book by its cover is a mistake, well, I don't know what their agenda is. I don't know if they're just misinformed, if their own mind has been contaminated by some bogus thinking, or they could be a malevolent actor. Of course, the malevolent actors in the world, of course they don't want you to judge a book by its cover, because if you judge them, you might start to figure out a few bits and pieces before they even open their mouth. Now, as I've said, You can't entirely judge the book by its cover. You do need to read the book. But to just disregard the cover is nonsense, folks. As I'm already laying out here, we can very clearly see that people's faces fall into certain categories: friendly and trustworthy, aggressive, and with high testosterone cues, the propensity to be physically aggressive. We've got other people in the category of being snakes, being sneaky, being not trustworthy. And we instinctively can sort of detect this whenever we look at people. You will be looking at me right now. You will be casting a judgment. You will be judging this book that you are seeing before you, the cover of this book. And so you should. You should be judging this cover that is the Bandido. And not only should you be doing it, it's actually out of your control, because your brain does it anyway. And your brain will generate an immediate feeling, a visceral gut reaction when you see someone that you have never seen before. And they're going to go into the category of being perhaps friendly and trustworthy, high testosterone, aggressive, sneaky, like a snake, who would sell you out and stab you in the back. People give off cues in their face that tell us something interesting about who they may be. So you should absolutely judge a book by its cover. It shouldn't be what your final conclusion is based upon, but you should definitely judge the cover of the book. If you don't, you're missing out on very important information. There could be very important information in that cover that could tell you something interesting about the person. And so all I'm going to say is that whenever I first saw our mate Rob, the new Prime Minister of the Netherlands, when I first saw his face, it conjured up a certain feeling about what I think about this person. I definitely had a very strong feeling about which category this person is likely to fall into based on my first impression. When I analysed his face, it was actually his face. I have to be honest, folks. It was his face that made me click into the story, because I thought, that's an interesting face. And then I went on to Google Images, and I thought, because I want to run the experiment fairly, I thought, well, maybe he's just been caught. The camera has caught him in a certain light, with a certain expression. And so I went on to Google Images and typed in Rob's name, the new Prime Minister of the Netherlands. I was going to say New Zealand, of the Netherlands. And when I typed his name into Google Images, all of the pictures looked exactly the same. My suspicions were confirmed. Now I know you might be saying, Mr. Bandido, what category did Rob's face fall into? Of these potential categories, and there are others, but of those three categories that you've just named, friendly and trustworthy, high testosterone, aggressive, sneaky, or a snake who would stab you in the back, which category did Rob, the new Prime Minister of the Netherlands, fall into? Folks, I need to tell you something interesting. There's this concept. I don't know if I developed the concept. Maybe somebody else has. If I have stolen this concept from someone, well, oh well. Such is life. But I don't think I have. It's called the art of the incomplete thought. The art of the incomplete thought. What is the art of the incomplete thought? Basically, folks, people in general feel the need to painfully explain their entire thinking to a listening audience because they're afraid that if they don't fully explain themselves, they are going to be misinterpreted. And so you get a whole bunch of people on the internet earnestly trying to explain every nuance of their worldview. And of course, this is an absolute mistake, because it doesn't matter how well you explain yourself, people can of course misinterpret what you say. People can clip you out of context and make it look as if you're saying something that isn't quite what you meant. So it's a losing battle. It doesn't matter how well you explain yourself on the internet, you will always be misinterpreted to certain people. So it's a waste of time trying to fully explain yourself. And so this is where the art of the incomplete thought comes into the equation. You should never try to fully explain what it is that you mean about anything. Why? Because it deprives the listener of engaging with their own imagination and critical thinking. This is what the great storytellers, the great authors, the great movie directors, they all do this. The great musicians who write their lyrics. Because remember, folks, a song with lyrics is a story. It's a short story that's told within 3 or 4 minutes. A movie could go on for 2 or 3 hours, and a book could go on for 700 or 800 pages. But the point is, whether it's a song, a book, or a movie, all of the great storytellers, they understand the concept of the incomplete thought. And the reason why this is so important when it comes to storytelling is because you don't want to deprive your audience of engaging with their own imagination. Because if you just explain absolutely everything, if you lay absolutely everything out on a platter, you deprive the audience of coming to their own conclusion. You deprive the audience of formulating their own interpretation of what it is that you've actually told in your story. And so you end up depriving the listener, the reader, the viewer. You deprive them of using their own imagination and engaging with their own critical thinking. You want to, folks, you want to deliberately leave gaps in your thinking. Because when you leave gaps, that's like a hook for the audience. The audience then feels more invested. You've left space for them to fill in the gaps, to fill in the blanks. They feel part of your story now. If you just tell them everything, you leave no room for them to participate in your story. If you just lay it all out 100% on the table, you leave no gaps and you leave no space for participation from your audience. And so what happens with the audience? They feel disinterested. They don't want to engage because they feel like you are so intent on telling them exactly how the story works, exactly how the world works. And so the audience does not feel included. So the art of the incomplete thought is this idea that when you're telling a story or you're talking to an audience, you should never fully complete your thinking. You should never fully complete the phrase, complete the paragraph, complete the story. You should always leave little gaps in your thinking, gaps in your story, gaps in your own ideas, because that allows your audience to participate. They feel included. They feel as if you aren't lecturing to them. They feel as if you aren't trying to convince them of this way of thinking. You're giving them information, but you're not telling them how to think about it. You're just giving the information, you're leaving gaps that they themselves, with their own imagination and critical thinking, can then fill in. And they can then come to their own conclusions. They can come to their own interpretation. That is the art of the incomplete thought. And all great storytellers, whether they are songwriters, authors of books, or movie directors, they all understand this. They all understand the importance of leaving gaps and blanks in the story so that the audience can participate, fill them in with their own conclusions and their own interpretation. This way, the audience feels part of the creative process. And so the audience wants to participate. Now, why am I saying this? Well, our mate Rob, this new Prime Minister from the Netherlands, the youngest ever, and the first openly gay Prime Minister in the Netherlands. You want to know what category I've put his face into. Is he trustworthy and friendly? Is he aggressive and full of testosterone? Or is he a sneaky snake who would throw you under the bus, tell you what you want to hear, and then not be a man of his word? You want me to tell you what category this Netherlands Prime Minister is going to fall into? And of course, because the Bandido subscribes to the idea of the incomplete thought, I'm not going to tell you. You are going to go, or have to go, and look at the thumbnail for the video, for this show. You're going to have to go on to Google Images, type in Rob's name, and have a look yourself. I've laid it out for you as best as I can, but there are gaps and blanks in the story that I'm telling you right now. You have blanks that need to be filled in. I'm not here to tell you how to think about the world. That's up to you. And the art of the incomplete thought would say that it's very important that I leave gaps. So you're going to have to look at the thumbnail and think, is Rob the new Prime Minister of the Netherlands? Is he a trustworthy chap? Or is he not? Does he fall into some other category? Because, folks, you should always judge a book by its cover. Yes, you need to read the book, but you should always judge the book by its cover, in addition to reading the book. Don't disregard the cover. The cover is going to tell you some interesting information. Don't overlook that. So anyway, we're going to get into this. We're going to extract the lesson from this. I'm going to read you out a little article from the BBC, and then we'll figure out what we can take from this story. But before I do that, folks, I'm going to remind you, feel free to give our stream a thumbs up. Feel free to give us a like, folks, if you like what you're hearing. Get into the live chat if you are joining us live here on the show. Leave your comments, leave your insights. We'll get to any of those live chats at the end of the show. Get down into the comments if you are watching this live event after it has concluded. Let me know your thoughts down there. Will you agree or disagree with what the Bandido is saying? And then finally, folks, if you like what we do in general here at Bandido Talks, then feel free to subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. We are live Monday to Wednesday, 5 p.m. Irish time. 3 live shows here on YouTube. If that's not enough for you, we are not only live on YouTube, we are also live over on Rumble. You see this scrolling black banner below? You'll find all of the details that will allow you to direct yourself over to Rumble. We are live on Rumble Monday to Wednesday, 6 p.m. Irish time. So straight after this show, I go right over to Rumble and do another live show on a completely different topic. So you actually have 6 live shows every week. 3 on YouTube, 3 on Rumble. Subscribe here on YouTube. Head over to Rumble after this live stream. Subscribe to Bandido Talks on Rumble. You'll be notified of all of our upcoming live content, all of our video uploads. Keep you in the loop, folks. We can't have you missing out on lessons now, can we? But anyway, with all of that out of the road, folks, let us truly get into this afternoon's show. All right, so I'm going to go to this BBC article and give you a little bit of a grounding with respect to what it is that we're talking about here. Let me get this article up. Rob Jetten, the new PM for the Netherlands. This is a BBC article. I have an itchy nose. Okay, itchy nose aside. Here's what the headline of the article says from the BBC. Rob Jetten becomes Netherlands' youngest ever PM. Now, I'm not going to read this whole thing out, but we'll read a bit. So it says the following. Rob Jetten has become the youngest and first openly gay Prime Minister of the Netherlands after his minority government was sworn in. The 38-year-old claimed victory in October's election with his Democrats' 66 party, D66, narrowly beating anti-Islam populist Geert Wilders in a nail-biting election. Now, Jetten succeeds Dick Schoof. You couldn't make it up, folks. So Jetten succeeds Dick Schoof. What a name. How did he ever become Prime Minister with a name like that? Dick Schoof. He was succeeded by Jetten as Prime Minister, who oversaw one of the shortest-lived governments in Dutch history. Not particularly surprising with a name like that. Dick Schoof. He oversaw one of the shortest-lived governments in Dutch history. Let's go on down here. The article says, who is Rob Jetten? Okay. So Rob has said, let's get to work. Slick, smiling and patient, Jetten has spent years shaking off the nickname Robot Jetten, earned for his stiff, over-rehearsed TV appearances. I should have looked up this guy before I came onto the show. I'll look him up afterwards and see just how robotic he truly is. The transformation was stark on election night in a packed, sweaty music venue in Leiden. He seemed effortlessly at ease, confident and groomed as young supporters roared around him. It goes on to say that he joins a very small club of openly gay leaders, and for many viewers in countries where coming out carries real risk, seeing an openly gay man become Prime Minister is a powerful glass ceiling moment. Anyway, standing beside the king on the red carpet, spilling down the palace steps on Monday. What does that mean, spilling down? Standing beside the king on a red carpet, spilling down. All right, I see. It's related to the red carpet. So standing beside the king on a red carpet, spilling down the palace steps on Monday, Jetten gave the appearance of a well-polished premier. All right, so you get the idea here, folks. Let me get my main screen back up here. And let's get into this. Okay, so I've went through a little introduction. Always judge a book by its cover. Always. Read the book, yes, but always judge the cover. Absolutely. Don't let any deceptive piece of shit or idiot tell you otherwise. Of course you should judge a book by its cover. That's an important part of the process. So judge a book by its cover. Absolutely. But isn't this interesting, folks? You can see we've got this guy, Rob Jetten, the new Prime Minister of the Netherlands, the article. And trust me, folks, when I looked this up earlier this morning, all of the articles, it's not just the BBC, they're all saying the same thing. They say two things about this Prime Minister. It's like their leading line to convince you how great he is. The two things they say are as follows. Number one, he's the youngest ever Prime Minister in the Netherlands. And number two, he's the first openly gay Prime Minister in the Netherlands. Every article says the same thing. Now, why are these articles saying this? Folks, let's be critical in our analysis here. This man is trying to be sold to you as something different to all other politicians. That's the idea. Rob Jetten, he's different. He's going to be different. Why is he going to be different? Well, two main reasons. Number one, he's young. He's 38 years of age. So these articles are trying to convince you that because this man is young, he's somehow more in touch with the world. That's somehow supposed to mean that he's different from all of the other politicians because he's young. So that's the first thing. The second thing, they keep on harping on about the fact that he's openly gay. And that is also supposed to convince you somehow that he's a great man. You see the courage and the bravery that it took for Rob Jetten to come out as a gay Prime Minister in the Netherlands? You see that courage and bravery, folks? That's the reason why you should buy into Rob Jetten. He's a courageous man, the heart of a lion. So he's being told, or people are trying to convince you of his brilliance, number one, because he's young, and number two, because he's openly gay. All right, let's have a look at this, folks. Number one, this whole idea that he's young. He's 38 years of age. Folks, that counts for fuck all. Zero. I don't care what age you are. That doesn't give you a ball. It certainly doesn't give anybody a ball with me. If you're in the game of politics, I don't care. Because what I'm going to be watching out for are not your words. I'm not going to be listening to Rob Jetten only. What am I going to do, folks? You know what I'm going to say. I'm going to be listening to what he says, yes, but then watching and observing his actions. Because the words mean fuck all without the legitimate action. So I don't care what he says. I don't care what age he is. Just because he's younger than other politicians doesn't mean that he talks any more sense than the rest of them. It doesn't automatically mean, just because he's 38 years of age, that somehow he's a sage with respect to how the world works. I'm 31. He's only 7 years older than me. You wouldn't call the Bandido a sage, would you? I'm still a cub. 31 is nothing. 38 isn't much better. So just because Rob Jetten is 38 years of age and happens to be the youngest ever Prime Minister in the Netherlands, that counts for precisely zero in my book. Zero. Because I don't care what age he is. I don't care what he says, actually. What I care about is what he does. In other words, his actions. That's what I'm interested in. Because we talk about this on the show all the time, folks. Words are meaningless without legitimate action. We can say anything. We can come out with the most ludicrous nonsense. We can say it. We can put it out there into the airwaves. We can write it on a piece of paper. It doesn't mean that we are going to do what we say. It doesn't mean that we are who we say we are. Just because we say it, it doesn't mean anything. For the words to acquire legitimacy, you need to see action backing them up. Because it's only when you see the action do you realize that the person is actually serious about what it is that they are saying and that they mean what they are saying. If I say to you, I'm going to turn up at your house tomorrow and fix your burst pipe in your radiator, you'll say, oh, well, that's great. Okay, call around at 3 p.m. and I'll say, absolutely. I'm the best plumber in the land. I've got all the tools and tricks to fix your radiator. I can talk a good game. I can talk about how my price is much lower than everybody else. I can say about how skilled I am. Of course. But you see, if I turn up tomorrow and I start to get to work on your burst pipe, and it becomes evident after a few minutes that I am the most retarded plumber in the land, well, my words don't really count for much. Or they didn't count for much, did they? I can say I'm the greatest plumber in the land, but you are only really going to know just how great I am once you see me in action. Until you see me in action, it's all just words. It's just vibration in the airwaves. That's it. It doesn't mean anything. If you see me fixing your burst pipe like a retard, then what I was saying to you yesterday about how great I am as a plumber, it acquires zero legitimacy. In other words, I'm not a man of my word. I'm full of shit. And this is why we don't listen to words, folks, in isolation. We need to listen to the words and then look and observe what sort of action follows the words. So Rob Jetten, I don't care what age he is. His age means precisely zero to me. I'm interested in his actions. That's it. If he doesn't back up his words with legitimate action, then I don't give a shit what age he is. Now, of course, it's been sold to you. His age is being really, drilled home here. It's been hammered home. Why? Because there are a whole bunch of young people out there in the world who don't really relate to older politicians. They look like their granddad or their grandma. And so now you have this young guy, 38 years of age. He is going to be naturally more appealing to a younger person than some old fart who's in his 70s. So yes, it's an easy way to sell Rob Jetten to the younger audience, because the younger audience is going to be able to relate to this younger person who doesn't have a big wrinkly face. That's true. But what I'm saying to you is, that doesn't count for anything, because you need to see his actions. That's all we are really interested in. Does he act upon what he says? All right, so age counts for nothing. Because he's 38 years of age means nothing to me. It shouldn't mean anything to you either. If you are a young person and you are seeing Rob Jetten and you're thinking, great, there's now a young person in politics. This is great. The tide is turning. Don't be a retard. Don't be a retard. No tide is turning. You have no evidence yet of what this gentleman stands for, what this new Prime Minister stands for. You need to watch his actions. Just because he's young, it doesn't mean anything. And even though you may be a young person, it's no good in you surrendering your logic, throwing it in the gutter, just because Rob Jetten is young. So you shouldn't do that. Of course not. The second thing, he's an openly gay man. Well, whoop-de-fucking-do. I mean, it's 2026, folks. I mean, in 2026, you could identify as a box of fucking cereal. You could walk into your classroom and you could say, no, today I identify as a Lucky Charm. You know the Lucky Charm cereal? That's what you can do in 2026. You can identify as a Lucky Charm. And you know the funny thing? Everybody has to agree that you are right. Everybody has to use your pronoun of choice. Oh no, I'm going to use the Lucky Charm pronoun. And everybody has to abide by your identification rules. Otherwise, they lose their job or they get ostracized for being a fucking racist or a bigot or discriminating or whatever fucking word they want to use. So Rob Jetten, he's been praised because he's coming out as an openly gay man. Who gives a flying fuck about his sexuality? Who gives a fuck? That does not buy Rob any credit from the Bandido. I don't give a shit. In fact, and I know some of you aren't going to like this, but as a straight man, it gives me the creeps. I have to be honest. Now you're going to say, oh, well, you're a homophobe. It's not a homophobe. That's not what I'm being. If you are a straight heterosexual male and there's some gay dude beside you, it should give you the creeps because that gay dude is probably looking you up and down. He probably might find you attractive. And if you're a straight man, that should creep you out. I'm not saying that Rob Jetten shouldn't be allowed to be an openly gay man. Of course he can. I don't give a fuck. But if I'm being honest, not only does it not buy any credibility, it doesn't give him more credibility in my eyes. Not only does it not do that, but it gives me the creeps. Because I look at this dude and I'm sort of looking at him and thinking, right, well, I have an idea what goes on behind closed doors now. You know, when the curtains are drawn. So this idea that he's some hero, some braveheart, some courageous gentleman for coming out and saying that he's openly gay in 2026, this isn't courageous. You get rewarded for doing this in 2026. We talked about this, folks, with our episode on depression and mental health. In 2026, if you come out as a man or a woman, either gender, and you say, I'm depressed and I struggle with my mental health. If you come out and say that, you actually get credibility in the eyes of modern day culture. You get credit because you're a man who's coming out and expressing his feelings, being emotionally raw. You actually get credit. People praise you for doing this. And it's the same with being gay. Fair enough, if he had have come out being gay 50 years ago, then yeah, he deserves more credit then. Because there was an actual price or cost to coming out as gay 50 years ago. There's no fucking cost now. People identify as boxes of cereal. Lucky Charms, remember, folks? There's nothing courageous about it. Who cares? You're a politician. I don't give a fuck. If you want to date a man, well, you go about that. That's fine. It doesn't mean that you earn more credibility. Who's under this illusion that because he comes out as being openly gay, that he's now more credible? Who's establishing that line of logic? The fact that Rob Jetten is openly gay, once again, means precisely zero to me. And as I've already said, it gives me a creepy feel. Not because he's a bad person, not because there's anything wrong with homosexuality, but because as a straight man, it gives me the creeps to think that someone might be eyeing me up if they are a man. That gives me the creeps. I have to be honest. And so it's not some great selling point to me. Fundamentally, I don't care. And it's interesting though, because in every article, it keeps getting mentioned either in the headline or the first few paragraphs. So everybody really wants us to know that not only is he the youngest prime minister, but he's openly gay. All right. So he's young and he's gay. Big deal. Who cares? I'll go back to my original point. Neither of these things buy extra credibility in my eyes. And they shouldn't in your eyes either. Because when you think of this logically, being young and being gay, how does that help anyone? He's a politician in the Netherlands. How does him being young and gay in itself, how does that help anyone? It doesn't help anyone. It means nothing. But you see, this is being used. This is being used to sell the idea to you that he's a great person before he even gets into the role of Prime Minister. And this is where the lesson here is, folks. You are being primed. You are being primed and convinced into liking this man before he has even opened his mouth as Prime Minister, before he has even given us enough time to observe his actions. You are being, let's just say, cleverly convinced before you have evidence with regards to how you should assess this individual. Now, as I've already said, I have not met this man. He could be a very pleasant man, for all I know. I have no idea. I've never met him personally, so I can't make a character assessment about Rob. But what I can say is that when I read the media surrounding Rob becoming the new Prime Minister of the Netherlands, when I read the media, this has nothing to do with Rob. Rob Jetten is Rob Jetten. I'm talking about the media. The media is trying to convince you of how great a person he is before he even becomes Prime Minister. And the two ways in which they are trying to convince you that you should trust this guy, that he's going to be a good guy, that this is a good move for politics, is that number one, he is young, and number two, he's openly gay. What are these two things trying to convince you of? Number one, by hammering home the point that he's young, it's trying to get this idea across that he's more in touch with the youth. He's more in touch with what young people are thinking. And so he will resonate more with you, Mr. Young Person or Miss Young Person. In other words, it builds more natural rapport if a young person sees a sort of fellow young person in a role of power. So that's the first thing. And then this whole idea of being openly gay, again, it's trying to sell this idea that Rob Jetten is extremely courageous and brave. Now, as I've said, if this had have happened 50 years ago, then yes, you could mount that argument. In 2026, folks, when you can identify as a lucky charm, and everybody has to believe you and use your lucky charm pronouns, in 2026, it's not really that big of a deal coming out as being gay. It really isn't. It is wholly accepted within modern culture in 2026 that it's not a big deal being gay. Nobody cares. It's not especially courageous or brave. But you see, that's what's being used. There's an underlying, let's just say, motivation here for telling you this. This idea that Rob Jetten is brave and courageous is being thrown your direction. And they are able to sell you this idea, the media this is able to sell you this idea because their evidence is, well, look, he's a high-profile political and public figure and he's come out as being openly gay. Look how courageous he is. Look how brave he is. He's going to use that same courage and bravery for you, Dutch people. He's going to stand up for you and represent you because if he comes out at 38 years of age as openly gay, look how much courage and bravery that takes. What do you think this man is going to do for you, Dutch citizen? Not only is he young, so he's in touch with all of you young people. He'll be able to resonate with you. Not only is he young, he's not an old fart, he's not an old dinosaur, he's not institutionalized. Not only is he going to fall into the category of being this young hero for all of you. But look at the courage and bravery he has shown. He is going to use that same courage and bravery to fight on your behalf and to make your life as a Dutch citizen better. That, folks, is what is being sold to you. And here's the lesson. You have no evidence that he is any of these things. And when I say any of these things, I mean you have no evidence yet that he is going to be the great hero, the great braveheart, the courageous sort that's going to improve the Netherlands. You don't have that evidence yet. But you are being primed to believe that this person is going to be all of these things. The lesson is, folks, be very aware. When you read media and someone is being sworn in as a prime minister, always be aware, folks. Judge people, not based on what other people are telling you to think of this person. Judge people based on their actions. And judge them based on how much agreement exists between their words and their actions. That is the only way you can truly judge someone. I've talked about already, you have the cover of the book. You're able to look at Rob Jetten, and you can cast your judgment based on his physical appearance. What category you want to put him in. What's your visceral gut reaction whenever you see him? That's the first thing. The second thing, folks, to truly judge Rob Jetten, you have to be fair. And you have to say, well, okay, let's have a look at what his actions have been up until this point. So what evidence do we currently have? Is he a man of his word? And then let's see when he gets in as Prime Minister. And we get more evidence in. Does he back his words up with that legitimate action that is necessary to give meaning and significance to his words? Well, let's see. But the lesson is, folks, go into this assessment with a clean, open mind. Don't be biased. Don't be biased one way or another by what the media is saying. Judge the cover of the book, have that in the back of your mind. Assess his physical appearance, particularly his face. See what that face tells you. So you have that information sitting over here. Then you know the next thing that you're going to do? You're going to then watch his actions. And watch and see specifically. Do his actions fall in agreement with his words? Or is there a fundamental divergence between what he says and what he does? Now you can run the proper assessment. And be fair. Wait for the evidence to come in. Listen to what he says, watch what he does. Now, along with your judgment of the cover of the book, you can now bring this information from his actions and his words towards the cover of the book analysis. And now you have a more comprehensive analysis of who Rob Jetten really is and what it is that he really stands for. But don't be swayed. Don't allow media or other people to contaminate your thinking before you have run a fair analysis. Watch the actions and the words. Judge the cover of the book. Then you will have all the information. And when you're reading media, be very aware that these two things, his age and his sexuality, are being used to give you a certain impression about who he is and what it is that he's going to do before he's actually done anything. Do your background check. Have a look at this man's actions. What has he done in the past? Where did he come from? And what is he going to do in the future? Watch how this pans out. Allow the evidence to come in. Watch what he does. Listen to what he says. Is there agreement between actions and words? That is how you run your fair analysis. And of course, you should judge the book by its cover. And then bring in that other evidence. That's the lesson, folks. Be very wary of someone or some institution or media outlet. Be very wary of institutions or people trying to sway your opinion of someone before you have the evidence Don't put the opinion of someone else before the evidence. Wait for the evidence to come in. Do some digging and see if you can get some evidence from the past. Pull it all together. Now you have your assessment that's comprehensive. That's the lesson. So, let's have a look and see. Do we have any live chats? I don't know if there's anybody in the live chat. Let's have a look and see. Let's have a quick look. Let me get this set up. We have one live cat. One live cat. Not a live cat. We have one live chat. Who's it from? It's from Tuco. Tuco's back in the live chat. Let's see what Tuco says. He has a funny looking emoji. It looks like a Pinocchio emoji. And he says, Robber looks like an exceptional human. Well, Tuco thinks that Rob looks like an exceptional human. It's hard to tell if there's any sarcasm in there. Is there any sarcasm? This is what happens when you just have writing on a screen, folks. We can't tell. But according to Tuco, Tuco thinks Rob looks like an exceptional human. We're going to have to assume that he then goes into the category, according to Tuco, Rob goes into the category, the new Prime Minister for the Netherlands goes into the category of a trustworthy, wholesome, friendly individual. Isn't that right, Tuco? Maybe that's what Tuco's saying. Because we have to assume there's no sarcasm. We're just going to have to take Tuco at his word. Robber looks, he calls him Robber. Robber looks like an exceptional human. Well, that's Tuco's opinion. Remember, folks, the art of the incomplete thought. That's the conclusion that Tuco has come to. I'll let you come to your own conclusions. Anyway, that seems to be all the live chats that we have. And that draws our show to a close here on YouTube. A fine show indeed, folks. Of course, I will remind you to like the live stream, give us a thumbs up, get down into the comments, let me know what you thought about what the Bandido had to say about the new Prime Minister of the Netherlands. And then finally, folks, if you like in general what we do at Bandido Talks, then feel free to subscribe to Bandido Talks here on YouTube. I'm going to head over to Rumble right now. We're going to start our second live show of the evening over on Rumble, a completely different topic. Use the scrolling black banner below to direct yourself over to Rumble. I'm heading over there now. That draws everything to a close here on YouTube. Enjoy the rest of your evening, folks. And with that, it is over and out this evening on YouTube from the Bandido.